Eduardo is actually an old friend of the SEBA project because he's been part of the International Scientific Board for quite some time now, and we've learned a lot from him as in this function. Eduardo is a distinguished professor of anthropology at Indiana University. So he's a specialist, as he'll explain, of rural populations in Brazil, and he explores how these communities are altered. He's the director of the Center for the Analysis of Social Ecological Landscapes and the former co-chair of IPBES, which is the International Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So it's really fantastic to have you and have you explain the initiatives of transformation to sustainability in the Amazon. The floor is yours, Eduardo, and we're all ears.
Thank you, Jérôme. Thank you for this invitation. I wish I could be there, as you know. Congratulations to you and the organizers for this fantastic program that you have. It's a hard act to follow, Jeff Chambers, but what I want to bring is to bring up the perspective of people in this transforming Amazonian. In just a second. Okay. Before I start, I want to extend an invitation. I'm co-chairing a conference that we do every 5 years here at Indiana University at the Austrian Workshop. And we're meeting next June. So just want to extend this invitation to all of you to consider submitting a paper, a panel. It's a fantastic meeting where we gather here in Bloomington to talk about governance, commons from many different perspectives. So I hope you can come to join us. I want to bring, the perspective of the people, as I said, in terms of what are the contributions of place-based, local level households, communities, associations, and their networks in a transforming Amazonia. Usually, and because of the scale of transformation of the region and the overwhelming, problems that we're facing, I think we still tend to have a very structural look into the region, just to look at the larger macro scale, major factors that are driving changing in this region for over 50 years. And I'm focusing here particularly in the Brazilian Amazon. So I think we still have this sort of, overemphasis on the larger structural factors for explaining the changes, but also for looking for solutions going forward. And I think there are important questions, and what we've been trying to do is to look not only, from a top-down or a bottom-up perspective, but look at how those processes are interacting, how the policies, the markets, the ideas that are shaping the region broadly interact with local decision-making and collective action. And what we try to do is to bring what we call a grounded complex systems perspective to look at those interactions as producing and co-producing each other. So not as isolated process and not as inconsequential process when you look at the local level. But those decisions are part of this regional transformation. For one thing, decisions on land use and migration at the household level, the community level, have a direct consequence for urbanization and for the patterns of urban expansions in the regions and the problems that come about to that. And also to the larger governance of the landscapes that emerge out of this, collective actions and social movements that are shaping the region today. So I want to touch on these relationships through empirical examples that we've been working through different projects and raise some of those questions that we're trying to address at the interface of regional transformation and local actions, to influence and that are influenced by such transformation. This is part, of course, of a larger research agenda that is taking place in the region and many other places that are looking at this sort of bottom-up movements, the innovations that are appearing and are, being developing in different parts, in different regions, and to what extent, what factors can facilitate, and amplify these transformations or overwhelm them. So part of the questions here that are driving this is understanding what factors contribute to sustaining local initiatives, particularly those focusing on more sustainable futures for the region, replicating and amplifying those initiatives to scale out at a large scale, at a broader scale. And what kind of cross-scale interactions, in what ways is different efforts, factors, and processes affecting the region are either aligning, hinder, or enabling the potential of such initiatives to have an impact in the region as a whole. So I'll draw, and I'm going really quickly here on examples that are complex, but the idea is to make the point, on the role and the increasing role that sustainability, place-based sustainability initiatives are taking the region. So I'm drawing here on a series of collaborations, and this is product of many colleagues and students that have been working on 3 particular projects that we've been doing the past few years. The first one, the Integrating Ecological Feedbacks project, is focused on fisheries and community-based management of fisheries. And we have ecologists, fish ecologists, geospatial analysts, psychologists, and anthropologists working together to try to understand those interactions, and the impact of community-based management in the western part of the Amazon. The Linkages projects is a project that is starting recently and is fundamentally a transdisciplinary project. We're working directly with organizations on the ground to understand how they're developing the factors that are facilitating or limiting their successes. And the Agents projects is a project that we finished recently that really try to document, understand, and bring visibility to this thousands of efforts that are happening on the ground and tend to be overlooked or invisible in regional discussions of transformation. So I'll start just very briefly with giving examples that we developed with the Agents project. And from there, I'll take 2 examples that I believe are emblematic to understand the potential and the limitations of this bottom-up processes that are also shaping the region today. So the Agents project was a 3-year project, very participatory on the ground, particularly in the state of Pará, but also in the state of Acre. And what I think was one of the most exciting projects I worked on, because we're looking for what actions are people doing on the ground. And just in a short period of time, we were able to document an incredible variety of actions and activities that are people put in place, for many years in many cases. So 200 different types of initiatives in over 900 localities and 184 municipalities. So you can see the scale of that. And we know that this is only the tip of the iceberg. These initiatives are everywhere, and I'll talk in a second what I mean by these kinds of initiatives. But they're everywhere in the region, and make a difference for sure at the local level, and in many cases already have a scaling out effect, that are contributing to respond to the challenges that the Amazon is facing today. So what are the kinds of initiatives? What do we call place-based initiatives? So we're looking for initiatives that are place-based, that are in a given territory, that are based on local ownership, that was sometimes externally started, but that local groups and networks and communities, associations and cooperatives have taken the ownership and the leadership in implementing them. They also are initiatives that are, really show the importance of collaboration. So none of the initiatives that we have documented, for instance, are single-level initiatives. They're based on collaboration in different kinds of partnerships, alliance, and networks. But also they're part of larger governance arrangements that have been put in place in the region, such as I'm going to mention, the community-based management of fisheries. So they, they're local, but they have many different kinds of connections with government programs, private sector, civil society, and different kinds of funding organizations. And what they are promoting and what we are looking at are the transformations that they are creating. So these are changes in production systems and resource management. So transition in production systems, for instance, different types of restoration and landscape restoration process, improving their own life standards and well-being, really focusing on improving conditions on the ground for the people involved. They also have other dimensions. These are initiatives, that are bringing consciousness, political awareness, political organization to local communities, improving local institutions or creating local institutions. In many cases, their main focus is on bringing the youth to the table and create opportunities for the youth, to succeed and to sort of look for their expectations where they live. And also they are part of a broader process in which, in many cases, they're overcoming oppressions and pressures and violence around them. Changing the relationship of gender in production systems and governance. And not least, perhaps one of the most important features, it's sort of trying to bring, the value of the regional biodiversity to the place where they work, to bring value aggregation industries and access to market to the local level, sort of to make it viable and to bring the benefits of their work to where people are. These are just an example of the kinds of initiatives that we're talking about. A variety of production systems, restoration, diversification of production systems, different kinds of forest management for timber and non-timber products, a variety of different types of agroforestry activities that are spread in different ways and sort of forming very different configurations at many different scales, and particularly, as I said, activities that are trying to bring, the economy locally, to verticalize value chains, to bring more economic benefits to these activities that are being developed locally. And they are part of a regional history that continues to evolve, and you see this a complex figure, but the idea on the top, you have trends in deforestation up to 2021 or so, with different phases of development, some of which persist. The developmentalist phase that had its high days in the 70s and 80s and came back recently. Social environmentalism and the many different policies that they have implemented in a variety of what we're calling market-based and cooperative, green schemes that are shaping new narratives of development in the region. On the bottom, you see when, the starting years of initiatives, when you start to see place-based solutions sort of, and initiatives taking shape in the region. And it's, a response to the destruction and to the expansion of deforestation and commodity extraction and production in the region, but also response to a variety of policies or programs and ideas that have been put in place. So you see that already as a response to deal with the outcomes of this development at the local level, but also in some case, and that's part of the question, in what ways they can overcome and this at a larger scale and succeed in transforming landscapes, from the bottom line. So this is a kind of a general introduction in a very short way from this project, and I'll go back to some of the results very briefly on the analysis of the database. But I wanna give two examples here that are very emblematic, not because of only of their recognition for, at least in part, their successes, but also because these are initiatives that started very locally and today are spread throughout the region. And we have a lot to learn from them, both from their successes and the challenges that they continue to face. I'll start with Açaí agroforest. I've been studying Açaí agroforest since 1989, or when it, before it gained a global market. And, it's one of those really interesting examples where an existing production system that was very established, particularly in the Amazon Delta and estuary region by till the 1970s or so, and producers that produce on a combination of forest management, agroforestry systems, some extractivism, you start to respond to a very fast change in market demands. First, regional urban markets in demanding for low cost staple foods, which is the example of acai in that region, and progressively, to a national expansion that, sort of brought a huge market and very valuable prices to acai fruit, and continue to expand, the variety of products globally. And the question is, among other questions, is in what ways we have seen in this case locally, local knowledge, local techniques for production, their ability that they had to respond and intensify production without necessarily leading to deforestation. But also what have been the benefits of this expansion to the producers that are originally at the base, and through their hands that this global market have been able to develop. Over time, of course, there are different types of intensification, and all the ways to today plantations of acai in monocultural systems. But sort of one of the key important base of this production system continues to be smallholder, small scale riverine areas, progressively to also to upland areas that continue, to respond to this market and have become today what I would say is the most inclusive and important production system in the region because of the scale of employment and the scale of landscape transformation that it has promoted, employment in urban areas, in rural areas, and the scale of transformation in rural areas around the region. So today, and that's part of the agents database, documenting initiatives, that are based on promoting or transitioning production system to agroforestry-based production systems, not least inspired in many ways by the expansion of acai agroforestry. Now, the acai case is a very emblematic story because it reproduces, a situation that you find around the Amazon in terms of no matter the kinds of resources that you look, which is this, the invertedly proportion of the value aggregation away from the region where it's produced. And acai became very emblematic, I think, because of that. It's a fruit that has high value, high market demands, right? Brings a very important economy to the region. But the highest proportion of this economy is sort of aggregated in terms of value and benefited very far away from the region. Now, we're also seeing then the response to that process, and that's, as I said, one of the main features that we have seen over the years is this effort to verticalize value chains, to bring the processing and the value aggregation in many ways close to production areas, and therefore creating, the opportunities for employment and for better benefit, but also generating tax for municipalities, for instance, which is one of the key development problems in the region. So that's a very briefly view of the acai economy, just to show how an economy that started at a very particular region and through the hands of local producers has gained, of course, national market and international market, but also has spread as a land use system throughout the region, but no free of problems. The other case I'll take from a system that is started in the western part of the Amazon, is throughout the Amazon state and also part of Pará, in parts of the Amapá state, you have the same system, which is the Pirarucu or the Arapaima community-based management of fisheries. But as you may know, the Arapaima population is, there is historically fisheries with a lot of pressures. in the Amazon. By the end of the 1990s, it was at a critical level of endangerment, and of course, as endangered on the endangered species list. And in one particular area of the Middle Solimões, in a collaboration between sort of scientific work and local fishermen, were able to develop a method, for managing the pirarucu on the base of counting in quotas that would allow the population to recover. And it started in one particular sector, and in just a few years, it started to show an incredible result on the recovery of the fisheries itself, and of course also on the benefits that the communities were gaining from it. So it's a story that has basically restored largely, the population of Arapaima in many parts of the region, and with that, lake ecosystems and the broader fisheries of lake ecosystems, and it continued to spread and to develop, although not free of problems. So today you see examples of, this includes Arapaima, but also other fisheries, that is also spreading as a model, to different parts of the region. And nowadays, just the Arapaima fisheries, for instance, in Brazil, includes over 5,000 fishers and in near 500 communities, and it continues to expand. Now, it's a great success story, but it's not a perfect story. And that's, I think, part of understanding in what ways this development has taken place. What are the challenges that they're facing now, to sort of consolidate and to expand and to benefit from this such successful system. So on the one hand, it's I'm quoting here a colleague, João Campos Silva, said it's the fish of change. It has changed completely the relationship and the ownership of local fishing communities of the lake that they manage. So secure resource rights, recover the fish, improve income in many ways, improve community infrastructure and access to service, and develop an incredible level of organization, and governance among many communities in the region. On the other hand, as any common pool resource, you have problems of appropriation, regulating appropriation of the resource, right? So there's for everybody, and there's time for recovery. But you also have the cost of provisioning, right? Of contributing to the maintenance of that resource. And that's a big challenge. It has been a big challenge for communities involved in the system, which is the very high cost of monitoring that they have to incur, right? And then, which means, policing, monitoring, and a number of activities that whole communities are involved with around the year. But on the other hand, the market deficiencies continue to be major. So you have, an incredibly low price for many areas. Although, as you see, you have actions, to try to revert that. But the reality for most, fishers and fishing communities is that they are confronted with an incredible market problem and, low value for a high quality product. In addition, of course, to illegal markets that have also flourished in the region recently. Now, one aspect that, is very relevant, I think, for this meeting, is the much broader benefits that this more localized, systems of management have for the region. This is a figure on ongoing work by Ana Carlos Rodrigues and João Campos Filho from the Federal University of Alagoas. And basically, they're talking about the area that is monitored, right, by communities managing different lakes, and divided here in three types of, monitoring in stewardship. So the direct monitoring to the area that is directly near their lakes, the effective one, the areas that they have to cover, and the functional monitoring, the larger areas that are part of their fishing agreements that include many different communities. Which means the point here is that they have an incredible role in securing and maintaining very, very large ecosystems at their own cost. Right? So we have this mismatch between the contributions and the recognition and the value that they're getting for the work they're done. And that is creating significant disincentives in the region as well. But here, just as I show, for the case of acai, the emergence of many different industries and cooperatives trying to aggregate value and to sort of verticalize those value chains so they benefit most. You also see, this is one example of several examples of what I'm calling a super local organization, kind of sort of networks of different regions managing Pirarucu. This is the example of the Coletivo de Pirarucu, the Pirarucu Collective, which is sort of a federation-like network of cooperatives, organizations, management areas that are working together, also with non-governmental organizations, with private organizations, and so forth, to look at to face the common challenges that communities alone cannot face on the ground. One example, and that has to do both with markets, but also regulations that affect all those different communities. And Coletivo de Pirarucu, I think, is a very interesting example of this emergence of sub-regional sort of governance arrangements that are sort of playing an intermediate role between very place-based initiatives and large-scale policies and infrastructure, sort of to coordinate and address the needs of particular regions. One example is that they have been able to improve significantly the logistics for marketing the Pirarucu fish and open new markets for Pirarucu in southern Brazil, thus having been able to improve the price and the return for communities participating in this. So bringing things together again and again here using mainly the agents database, and we're trying to look at, across all these hundreds of initiatives, what conditions have facilitated those who have achieved their goals, on the basis of the goals that they define themselves, which is one of the features, the variables that we have in this database. And it's quite interesting. I mean, and this is important because we have to learn from 30 years of intervention in the Amazon, in which most of those interventions are based on external ideas and external leadership, and external goals. And what we see in this process and among these initiatives that I'm saying is that there's a lot of learning. For 20 years, you have a lot of failures as well, but there's a lot of learning from previous errors, from previous programs, from previous financing, that are shaping now how they are confronting, or learning from that to succeed locally, although they are confronting other problems at a regional level. So local leadership, that's a feature that we see across initiatives that are, sort of sustaining themselves and preparing themselves for, sort of for advancing. And, that reflect their visions, their knowledge, their experience from past efforts, right? And these are taken into account, taking forward. One feature that is really, if I had time, I would explain this in detail. I actually have a slide about it. But one thing that we have seen emerging during the past, decade or so, is that these sorts of local initiatives are not, as in the past, limited to change production system or to change the governance of an area or to focus on market. They are integrating all those three dimensions. And that's what is making a difference, that, as they invest in, for instance, transitioning to an agroforestry system with high value fruits, right? They're also investing in having conditions for value aggregation for market and the governance arrangements that facilitate that, including collaborations and alliances with other groups. So this is a key feature, very different than previous, periods of local projects or external intervention that tend to focus on one of this instead of this sort of combination of the two. They don't work alone. In every case, and here's a call that also is relevant for the research community, which have been really key partners in this process. But initiatives that are succeeding, initiatives that are able to scale up or to sustain, in conditions of diversity, they have alliances, they have partnerships, and those partnerships at all levels. You see alliance with municipalities, with local movements, with church, with local private companies. But you also see international and national, or in collaboration among them, to form alliance and partnership to confront the many challenges that they are a part of. And one other feature that we find, it's sort of helping initiatives to succeed, is one of the key, limitations of the Amazon, at least from this point of view, which are the huge logistical bottlenecks and disadvantages that, sort of communities, organizations, small cooperatives, associations have, in a region of such proportion, and therefore are always in disadvantage when you talk about market, about, sort of economic return, and seeking new opportunities. So these are some of the features that we see, emerging across initiatives when you compare them over time. So a couple of slides here. A final slide reflecting on the point here. So we're trying to bring visibility and understand what factors, sort of influence these sorts of bottom-up processes and governance and actions to transform the reality, of the region. But there's no panacea. This needs to be very clear. We're not arguing, for this level as the panacea level for reverting the problems of the region. They are important protagonists, but they need partnership, and they cannot do things alone. So, as the fourth point here says, initiatives alone cannot overcome the many problems, the many conflicts, and the incredible violence that surround many of these areas in the region, and the illegal economies that they have to confront. So, it's after years in which they felt just by themselves and confronted by all sorts of pressures, I think the need now is to find programs, to develop programs in partnership with them, but that, that help to position them better in a region that is still transforming so fast. They are invisible in general. I mean, you do not find statistics. You do not find statistics about the economic contribution of many of the systems. Even acai fruit or the arapaima, the statistics are incredibly bad in terms of actually representing the economic contributions that they bring to the region, and therefore the recognition they should have for such contributions, including recognition for addressing the problems and the limitations that they have. There's quite a bit of evidence of scaling out and amplifying those impacts. So we see many success cases. We see, sort of a lot of opportunities in taking these initiatives, to have a larger impact on regional landscapes. We also find disappearance. I didn't show slides like that, but depending on the context, the communities that are smallholder producers are full of pressures from land markets, from expanding frontiers, from all sorts of land occupation and floodplain occupation that are around them. So we also see, continuous process of disappearance or, out-migration to urban areas in some place. That's my place. That's my, sort of my contribution here. It was really quickly. I hope it brought a different view, perhaps, to what's happening in the region and how people are reacting to these problems in the region from the bottom up. And I think we need to bring more visibility to that in understanding the processes that may contribute this, to have a larger regional impact. Thank you. and of course, many collaborators and funders that are part of this process.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. It was a really enlightening speech and talk. We seldom see the Amazon from the point of view of communities and place-based economies. So that's really an important aspect that is understudied as you showed. Are there questions for Eduardo? Maybe a couple questions would be good. We're running a bit late of time, but that's okay. We can take a couple questions. I can keep it. There's one.
Hello, thank you. I just wanted to know, I know it's not very political, but have you noticed any changes since the change of government in Brazil regarding your project or the actors you're working with? Like, what has changed since then? That was my question.
Yes, inevitable question. Yes, right. Well, yes, I mean, there has been change, you know, for one thing, you know, I remember working over the past few years and the level of concern, of pressure, you know, of fear that communities had was quite significant. You know, because you had many actors, many legal actors in power, you know, sort of to be bold in the region. So just that change, you know, and had a major effect on communities that were, you know, sort of pressed by many angles. We start to see progressively the restructuring of the environmental infrastructure, and for instance, helping with monitoring for illegal fisheries. That's one example that you see as, you know, small but important change that is happening there. And of course, you have, you know, representation, much better representation of the concerns of the communities in the political arena, right? And representatives that are, you know, sort of being brought to the table, back to the table, contributing to new policy. So it is a very different scenario. There's still a lot change to happen and a lot of promise to be realized, but we see, you know, already a much better environment, at least, or you know, an environment of less fear for communities on the ground.
Thank you very much. I also have a really quick question out of curiosity for you. You've been describing the process of this market construction in the local communities, and it was not clear to me to what extent those local communities are brand new, are migrants from other parts of Brazil or elsewhere, or have been established for a long time, and what difference it makes for them to engage in these processes when they're coming from elsewhere and they are completely in different setting.
That's a great question. I should clarify that and talk a little bit about the diversity of that. So for the Agents Project in particular, because we're looking for the region as a whole, we were starting from the perspective of the initiatives or of the actions, and then understanding who is doing them, if that makes sense. So it includes all sorts of communities. With many of these examples are in areas that were, you know, along the Trans-Amazon, for instance, or the Cuiabá-Santarém Road. You know, these are communities that arrived in the region 30, 40 years, or the formed communities, you know, 30, 40 years ago when individual families were arriving in the region and have been pursuing, you know, a different transition. I'll give, there are many examples that, you know, that what I showed here that are, you know, based in previously colonist communities. For instance, along the Trans-Amazon, we've been working with a cooperative of cacao producers and you know, the industry called Cacao A that's producing locally based, you know, chocolate of the highest quality. You know, this is along the Trans-Amazon Highway. These are farmers who arrived 30, 40 years ago, right? And are pursuing a different approach to what they do and how they do it. You have Japanese descendant communities, one of the cooperatives that I mentioned that arrived in the region 100 years ago. And along the floodplains, both the acai example, most of the producers in that case of the acai example and the Arapaima fisheries, these are riverine communities. So these are sort of, if you will, the historical peasantry of the region. We also documented a number of initiatives among indigenous communities. Although I didn't feature here, you find as many sort of initiatives across indigenous communities throughout the region. So yeah, it's interesting because it's coming from very diverse communities around the Brazilian Amazon.
All right. Thank you very much for your fantastic contribution to this meeting. We're very sorry that you can't be here today. In French Guiana, we have we call acai, we call wasai, and we have really good ice cream made of wasai. So hopefully one day we can have a wasai ice cream together. It would be really great. Thank you very much, and
thank you, Jérôme.
thanks again, and big round of applause.